Good day, everyone. I am Mylene Obejero, and I will be the first presenter of our group. In this presentation, we will be discussing the concept, program code, and the output of our project. I and my group mates decided to come up with an idea of creating a simple game that is not just fun, but it is a game that is worth playing for, considering it not just brings enjoyment to the player, but also helps enhance critical thinking and concentration. So our game project is Tic Tac Toe. And the first slide is the main menu screen, and this is actually the output of our project. So here is the concept. The tic-tac-toe game will start with a simple main menu screen. The first slide that you have seen a while ago is the main menu screen. The next screen will ask the user which game mode would they want to play. There's a player versus player mode and a player versus computer mode. That is the two game mode of the game. Two players can play against each other in player versus player mode, while player versus computer mode will be a game between one player and the computer. The first player to reach a total score of 10 points will be declared as the winner. The console will display an empty 3x3 grid when you select a game mode. So this 3x3 grid actually has a figure, and on the later part of our presentation, one of my group mates will be the one to show it. The scoreboard and a brief guide to playing the game are displayed below the grid. The players can use the numbers 1 to 9 to decide where to place their markings. The X and O are the two symbols or marks in this game. To earn a point, the player must line up 3 of his marks in a row. It's either vertical, horizontal, or diagonal. If the grid is full, but neither player can place 3 marks in a row, the round will end in a tie and the grid will be empty once more. So if you wanted to earn a point, you must line up 3 of X marks or O marks in a vertical, horizontal, or diagonal. And if it doesn't line up 3 of X marks or O marks and the grid is already full, then it will be in a tie and the grid will be empty once more, so that you can proceed to the next round. So this is the main function. We declared and initialized certain variables at line 2131 of the main function. Then, using a system function, we can change the color of the console. The main menu function is then called. Then, using get, wait for the user to touch any key. So here, we change the background color to white and the text to black. That is 7 for white and 0 for black. So we put in here the color 70 because we wanted our console to have a background of color white and a text of color black. Variable A will have the return value of the friendly match function at line 2140. If player 1 receives 10 points, the function friendly match returns 1. Otherwise, if player 2 scored 10 points, it will return 2. The winner will be the winner will be the one to score a total of 10 points. Then, using printf, we will show who won between the two players. So we can see this. This player %I won. This will be later on display if one of the player won.
Main menu function. At lines 13 to 15, we print a title and some text to be displayed in our main menu. We use escape characters to move the text close to the center. Play with function. We use system function CLS to clear the screen. Then we declare variable mode. Then we print some text asking for the user to choose a game mode. We'll scan for user input. Either number 1 or 2 are the input we are expecting from the user. If the user enters a number other than 1 or 2, we will ask the user to enter a valid number by calling this function again from the main function. This function will return the value of variable mode. This means that the function should return a 1 or 2 only. If some other number is returned, the function will be called again until the user inputs a valid number, which is a 1 or 2.
At next slide, we can see that we use a while loop at line 35. So without this while loop, the game will end after one win or a tie. We have a while loop with a condition of score not equal to 10. Then we set the global variable to false because every time someone scores or when a round end up as a tie. We set the set global variable to true in the check for winner function. Then we have a for loop at line 38 to set the elements or the strings in our 2-day array to be just a blank space. A blank space will retain the structure of the grid. At line 42, we have a do-while loop with a condition of win equal to false. We know that at check for winner function, we set win to true when a mark or symbols get formed in a row or when we get a tie. Inside the do-while loop, we call the functions frame, log console, select cell computer, frame, check for winner, and frame again. At next slide, to refresh our console with the current elements of our 2-day array, we use function frame. We want to refresh the console at the beginning of the round, before and after using the check for winner function to find a winner. Then we always set the score to be equal to player score or computer score, depends on which has a higher value. In other words, variable scores represent the current highest score between the two playing. This variable score is the variable used as a condition on the while loop at line 35. Also, every time someone scores or when the round ends with a tie, variable win is equal to true. Hence, the if statement at line 59 gets execute. The variable and playing is set to true. In other words, it is set to 1. The variable and playing represent the current player. It is either 1 or 2. Its value gets changed in function select cell computer because we pass its address through the call by reference method. At next slide, we can see that at line 64, we check if player score is equal to 10. If it is, we set variable winner to 1 at line 66. If player score is not equal to 10, we check if computer score is equal to 10. Remember that we won't be able to reach this part of the code if neither of the two variables gets a value of 10. We only reach this part of the code because the condition of the while loop at line 35 became false or unsatisfied when score is equal to 10. Then we return the value of the variable winner.
Friendly match function. This function is very much the same as the function computer match. We only call the different function at line 94, compared to what we called at line 46 of the function computer match. At line 46, we called select cell computer function, while here at line 94, we called select cell player function. Inside our while loop, we will set the variable win to false. Then we have a for loop that will rewrite the strings inside our array to a blank space. We do this to reset the grid every time someone scores a point or when the round is declared as a tie. Next, we have a do-while loop wherein our condition is win is equal to false. Variable win is a global variable, which means we can reset its value to be true from another function. In this case, we set variable win to true inside the function check for winner. Inside the do-while loop, we will call function frame to refresh the screen and display the grid. Then function log console will be called. Next is select cell player function. This function is for the processing of the user input. Then we will call frame function again to refresh the screen and get our last user input to be reflected into the grid before checking for a winner. Then we will call check for winner function to check if someone scores or when the round is a tie. At line 107, we check if P1 score is equal to 10. If it is, we set variable winner to 1. If P1 score is not equal to 10, we check if P2 score is equal to 10. Remember that we won't be able to reach this part of the code if neither of the two variables gets a value of 10. We only reach this part of the code because the condition of the while loop at line 83 became false or unsatisfied when score is equal to 10. Then we return the value of the variable winner. Frame function. We will use system function CLS to clear the screen. Then we will print the grid. At lines 2078 to 2080, we will print the number 179 through %C. This will result to a vertical line. Then at line 2079, we will print the strings stored in our current table array from index 0 to 2. We did the same to the lines 2101 to 2103 and lines 2124 to 2126. The code here at the bottom left of the slide will produce the horizontal lines of our grid.
Log console function. At line 2044, we initialize variable and CPU to be equal to pointer human AI. This pointer has a value true when called from function computer match. At line 2047 here, scoreboard player X in computer O and tie. The output function for this as you run the program will be this, the scoreboard. Player as X, computer as O, and of course time. And printf at lines 2050 to 2055 will display some text, and if you run the program, this will be the output. How to play enter 147358 This is the console log for computer versus human. And in the next slide, the else statement will run for the friendly match function. So this is for the friendly match function. Printf at lines 2062 to 2068 will display some text, and the output would be this image below.
At next slide, we have a select cell player function. So the variable cell will be used as a variable that will represent our array's index. Remember that our array current table is a two-dimensional array with size. So in lines 1960, we have a will subtract 1 since we only accept 1 to 9 as our input from the user, while indexes of arrays will start as 0. The indexes will work on our 0 to 8. So at line 1961, we have an if statement. The condition is strcnp, current table cell, just blank space is equal to 0. The condition will check if the string in our specified array with index cell is just blank space equal to 0. There is a space inside the quotation marks. Notice that on line 8, the initial strings stored in our array is only one blank space each. The equal to 0 means that it is true that we have the given string just blank space inside our array at index cell, which would also imply that if the string stored in the given array at the specified index is not the same to what we want, the if statement won't be satisfied. So, makita nato sa atong slide that we have our header at line 1 to 6. So, then we define size to have the value 9, true to have the value 1, false to have the value 0. So, these three will be used throughout our code, and we use them on this function. The next slide, if the if statement at line 1961 is satisfied, we will check which player is playing through an if statement. Pointer player will be used as a condition, which means we will check the current value of pointer player. strncpy, current table cell x2 at line 1966 will set the element or string stored in our array at index cell to x. Since pointer player is equals to 1, we'll add 1. Hence, pointer player is equals to 2. Then we'll set variable turn to false. strncpy, current table cell, 0, 2 at line 1971, we'll set the element or string stored in our array at index cell to 0. Since pointer player is equals to 2, we'll subtract 1. Hence, pointer player is equals to 1. Then we'll set variable turn to false. So, at the next slide, if the else if statement at line 1976 is satisfied, kay mo print siya og selected cell is already occupied, choose another one. So, we will set the variable turn to make sure that the user can enter another number since we ask him to enter another one. So, diri pud sa line 1982, kung ang else if statement is satisfied, so for example, kung ang mag-enter ang user og less than 1 or mag-enter ang user og greater than 9, kay kwan siya mo print siya incorrect input. So, note that ang pwede rin niya ma-enter is 1 to 9 only. So, at the end of the function, we will return the value of variable turn.
Select cell computer function is very similar to the select cell player function. However, since this function is for the player versus computer mode, we just adjusted some parts of the code to incorporate a special function to be used for the calculations of our computer. The lines 2001 to line 2028 will be executed when it is the player's turn. On the other hand, when it is the computer's turn, lines 2034 to 2036 will be executed. Here we have initialized integer g to have the return value of the function calculations AI. This function will return a value of 1, which means that we will subtract 1 from pointer player, which is currently 2. Then pointer player will have the value of 1, which means it is the player's turn. We also set turn to false. I'd like to mention that the function calculations AI will start from line 218 until 1945. It is the longest function we have in this program. It is a function that will calculate almost every possible combination available in the game to help our computer decide its move. And I will further elaborate the basic concept of how this function works in this code on a later part of the presentation.
Here is the check for winner function. The if statement at line 121 will check for a combination of 3x in a row at indexes 0, 1, 2. So here at line 21, if strmcp current table is equal to 0 and x is equal to 0, strmc current table 1, here the 1 and x equal to 0 and strmc current table 2. So this will be displayed as this. It will have a result of 3x marks in a row in a horizontal form. And in the next slide, it also has the same technique. And the if statement at line 127 will check for a combination of 3x in a row at indexes 3, 4, 5. Here we can see it. It's still horizontal. Just the same technique that we've used at line 121. I'll proceed to line 132. And in the next slide, here we can see the vertical. The if statement at line 138 will check for a combination of 3x in a column at indexes 0, 3, 6. Here, just the same technique from the previous slide, but here a vertical form. 3x in a row at line 0, 3, 6 at a vertical form. And here, same technique, but at indexes 1, 4, 7, 3x in a row, vertical form. Same, just in the indexes 2, 5, 8. And here is the diagonals. Here we can see it The if statement at line 154 will check for a combination of 3x in diagonal at indexes 0, 4, 8. So here we can see it. Set variables win to true, then add 1 to pointer P1. Pointer P1 is the pointer for the score player 1. And here you can see it. Index and the element 0, 4, 8. And in also, it's just the same in the previous slide, just different element and different. And here, it also diagonal. The if statement at line 159 will check for a combination of 3x in a diagonal at indexes 2, 4, 6. Here we can see it, diagonal. Just same technique, but and it is just the same for 0. It has horizontal in every indexes, and it also has vertical form, and lastly diagonal. For tie, the if statement at line 211 will check if win is equal to false, and will check indexes to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 up to 8 if occupied, which means if the grid is filled and the win variable is not true, no 3 marks or symbols were formed for a score and the grid is filled. This will be counted as a tie. So this is what I discussed earlier. If the grid is already full and there is no marks of 3x or OX in a row, then it will be counted as tie. It will be result to a tie and there will be no score for the 2 players.
Calculations AI function. As I've mentioned earlier, this function will serve as the core foundation of our computer in making its decisions. At line 228, we will check if the elements at indexes 0 and 1 or indexes 0 and 2 is O, and if the element at index 2 or 1 is a blank space, we will rewrite it to be O. At the next slide, we also did the same, but here we check the horizontal combination for index 0. Also at the next slide, we did the same. We check if the diagonal involving the index 0 does have an element of O at indexes 0 and 4 or at indexes 0 and 8. And if there are, we also check if we could rewrite a blank space to O. Basically, the concept of this function is to use if statements in checking all possible ways and combinations to score or block the player from scoring. I hope that you've understood the concept of this function. Since this is the longest function, we chose to just explain the concept of how this function works. We won't be discussing the whole function. Here's an example of how user input and data are being processed. First example will result to a tie. In the next example, X wins. Last example will visualize data when O wins. Here's a gameplay video. That's all, thank you.